Yes. So now, Mipam Gyatsho, having presented for us the view, is, to exaggerate, but also not, is using the view as a cudgel to beat the shit. I don't mind these. I'm deliberately making or using strong language out of those who think they know highest yoga tantra, but are not up to the special Nyingma view. In other words, to draw a sharp, to put it in more civilized language, to draw a sharp contrast between the special Nyingma view of within the Great Completeness in contrast to this other view, which is indeed his description of the Gelugpa view, which he wants to make sure Nyingmas don't mistakenly bring over into the Great Completeness. And our job, or I conceive of our job as mining this. This is a real gold mine to better distinguish what the Great Completeness is and to better distinguish what the Gelugpa highest yoga tantra view is. So it's a real gold mine. Now, of course, it will be upsetting, could be upsetting to those who don't see it as a gold mine, as a chance to learn more about their own view in contrast to somebody else's view, and thereby learn more about the other's view and learn more about one's own view. And I don't find fault with somebody's getting upset also. But it's a gold mine. So, just to review quickly, in item number 1 here at the beginning of chapter number 3, which will be the beginning of, the new book 2, both systems have to take account of how phenomena appear to common sentient beings, and common sentient beings include dogs, pigs, even worms, and I guess we'd have to say viruses and so forth. If one was infected with tapeworms, how things appear to a tapeworm. Bacteria. Go down, whatever example one wants to use for the lowly. And within common beings, this goes right up to those on the highest level of the path of preparation. So we use in the Institute for Tibetan Studies 2 different translations for the highest level: supreme mundane quality level, or of the path of preparation. That's the 4th level, or supreme mundane qualities. I've gotten 2 different explanations of whether it's quality or qualities. We won't go into that now. So that's just before the path of seeing. Everybody up from tapeworm to, tapeworm and below, right up to the supreme mundane quality path of preparation, where you're just about to perceive emptiness directly, is a common being. In terms of, there's another term that with the, shall we call you folks at Shravasti, that we discussed a great deal, and at least I came to the decision, usual beings. This term Ranga, we had many different translations that we're working over, and finally I alone decided was usual. We have common beings and usual beings, and I don't know if the line for usual beings, who seem to be less tutored, less developed than the highest level of common beings, if it's lower than the highest level of common beings. Just a peripheral point. Okay. Sokye Palpa, that makes it ordinary common being, would eliminate, people who had studied and practiced. Okay. So in number 1, what's being eliminated is that Gelugpas, what he's claiming is that Gelugpas are not speaking from the perspective of the, Give me the words. They're speaking from the point of view of the mode of appearance to sentient beings. Those poor Gelugpas are not speaking from the point of view of, give me the words.
Fruit.
Okay, from the point of view of the fruit, that's good. And from the other side of the
Mode of abiding.
the mode of the, what was our word instead of basal that I switched to?
Foundation.
Foundational mode of abiding. Okay? Foundational mode of abiding. Wouldn't we have to say yes? They're not. Not that they can't. Because when Gelugpas can and do talk about the fact that from the perspective of a Buddha's own perspective, there is just endless purity, right? It's not that they can't, and they do sometimes. From a Buddha's own perspective, there's just everything that appears is just takpa ramjam dunawa, appears as endless purity. Now, in terms of the foundational mode of abiding, or mode of subsistence, Gelugpas, I want to say we, but let's not switch hats. Gelugpas talk about the mode of abiding, which is emptiness, which is a mere absence of inherent existence. And don't talk about that as yin dan yeshin nisume, a non-duality of yin is basically means emptiness and pristine wisdom. So this is not the mode of appearance to, if we go down to, let me get in, several down lines, or, ordinary, common beings, this is the way things actually are in their final mode of abiding. But right after the colon, where it says, what need is there to consider whether the Buddha attributes of the 10 powers manifestly exist, right? When it comes to the 10 powers, the 10 powers don't. Well, in Nyingma also don't manifestly exist in the ordinary continuums of common sentient beings, whether in Nyingma or in Gelug. But they are primordially endowed in the continuums of sentient beings in Nyingma, but not in Gelug. And they're only there in potency in Gelug, but in Nyingma they are present in actuality. What are the words? In actuality, but not manifest. So, in terms of the presence of the 10 powers and so forth of a Buddha, in Nyingma terminology, then Gelugpas are following the mode of appearance to sentient beings. Rather than the mode of, what's the word instead of basal mode of abiding? Foundational mode of abiding. because they are there in the foundational mode of abiding in Nyingma. Phew, man. Okay. So, and as Khetsun Sangpo says, these capacities or potencies are there. The seeds are there, according to Gelug, but they aren't there in Gelug. Okay. But now, what I think none of us have straight is but maybe you do. I'm not satisfied with I've got to get my list of 10 or 15 or 20, but probably 15 sentences, which is the logic that's been presented in the first two chapters. Those 15 points. It's presented logically. And is it in two chapters or is it just in the second chapter? That's how out to lunch I am. You see, as opposed to the classes that are on the web about Tantra in Tibet, which are very carefully taught, these meetings that we're having are a workshop. We're knee deep in the work. I listened to a couple of those classes and I thought, oh, this guy's really got it together. He's got an agenda and he's presenting an agenda. And if the class is talking, he's just leading them on. And he is leading on the class. And that's good. But he really knows what he's talking about. Here, sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not. And a good deal of the time I'm not. But that's good. That's all right. as long as we're all being honest. Okay. Also, they think that even the explanations in a mantra that basis and fruit are undifferentiable are in consideration of the mere existence of causes of Buddhahood in that way. So number 2 is repeating number 1, right? Causes, capacities. In Gelugpa, capacities. In Nyingma, in fact. And the fact has to be uncovered. In one way, you can say it's not that different. In another way, you can say the vocabulary ends up as very different. And then you want to see, though, is the vocabulary indicating a basic difference? And that's what Mipam Gyatsho is saying. There's something very basic going on here, such that the Gelugpas are not getting down to reality, the deepest reality. And that's what he's warning against. Bringing over into Nyingma, because in the end, you're going to miss the deepest reality. Okay, now we're up to where we are. So, if you look at what Khetsun Sangpo is saying in around the 4th line, 3rd and 4th line, one need merely to be introduced and recognize that the Buddha attributes of the final fruit state are primordially endowed in the foundational mode of abiding. Now, this doesn't just mean when you figure out the words. Of course, in Mipam Gyatsho's teaching, he wants us to figure out the logic in the words, which will help us toward the meaning. But when you get to that meaning, which strikes me as, the pointing out teaching, what's called the pointing out, or by a Lama being introduced to fundamental mind, and you're identifying fundamental mind, at that time when you identify fundamental mind, do you think that you are identifying that the Buddha attributes of the final fruit state are primordially endowed in the foundational mode of abiding? Do you think that the first time you identify fundamental mind, you are going that far? Maybe you could go that far. Undoubtedly, there are some who do that. Maybe a few who do that. But from what I've been taught, and there are plenty of statements by Mipam Gyatsho himself that indicate that such a deep understanding comes in time, gradually, but to some it comes even right away, simultaneously or suddenly. See, I'm trying to point out something here. I'm not talking about what a lot of people talk about, pointing out. The Lama points out. But the word I often translate as introduce, Lama introduces, and you identify. Well, point out is good. It's a direct, the people who use the term, the Lama points out. Like, hey! In fact, one of the practices is to use the word put to clear your mind, right? That's in His Holiness's book. Put! But Tibetans say pait, but put, the Sanskrit word is put. You just shout it to yourself, put! So we often joke with each other, put! Scare the shit out of each other. Suddenly. You see, scare the shit? As His Holiness says, one Nyingma Lama must have, he said there are three types of shock. One of them is like you're going along the path, maybe even at night, and some dog goes, arf! Your mind clears out. And there's this hiatus, you see? Read about it in His Holiness's book. Three types of shock. That's when I decided, when I came upon His Holiness's the digitized. I asked people to digitize all my tapes, and when I came on that, the three types of shock, I thought, oh, I'm going to make a book out of this and see if it works, see if the book works, and then see if I can get it published for His Holiness. Get his permission, and then see if I can get it published. And it's been very popular in Snowline, Shambhala Snowline. When I read about the three types of shock, I thought, wow, that's going to be helpful. So I was inspired to mix that with the public teaching at London. There's a professor at University of Virginia who sometimes it helps to have these fancy words. Liminals is sort of the between space, the between space, where that's what put you say it to yourself in meditation. You would think, if you're saying it to yourself, how could it clear your own mind? But try it. Put! It's just put! And I think actually the Sanskrit pronunciation is more helpful, because the final T is with your tongue at the top of your mouth. It's called a retroflex. Retro back, flex bent to the back. A T. Tut, tut, put, put, put. You would think it wouldn't mean anything to you if you were doing it to yourself, but it's actually not the case. It can do a lot. So an example in Mipam's text, which I didn't understand right away, I thought, what the hell is he talking about? It's of the, if you're in a boat, even a power boat, the water, well, I don't know how much power, in the back of a boat, the calm water at the back of a boat. The water's going, rushing on the sides, and the water, the sort of between water at the back of a boat. And of course, scholar, this is a famous scholar at UVA, I forget his name. Both he and his wife work in anthropology. So of course they have to have a Latin word, liminal. But scholars are great for messing up things with words you can't understand. It makes it into something that then becomes important because it's got a Greek or Latin or I don't know what. It's got to be Greek or Latin. You can't put it into Russian. Is there any other language you can put it into? Greek? It's got to be Greek or Latin. At UVA in the medical building, I used to marvel that there was one door that made sense. It was ear, nose, and throat. The others were, they just had no idea what it meant. So I gave it an aura of, oh, this must be important. You couldn't understand what department it went to. You could just get the number on the door. And then you go, oh, wow, these people must really know something. But, and then I went back several years later, and they had it all in Latin or some language. I had no idea what it meant. And I thought, it's got to mean ear, nose, and throat. Anyway. Then, as one tastes with an undifferentiable from the foundational mode of abiding. So then you see, if that's the case, then everything in the foundational mode of abiding has to be pure and, pure and clean. And therefore in Jonang also, everything that's in there has to be pure, permanent. And if you remember the great Jonang professor that I invited to Taiwan, he made the really profound statement, which almost seems silly, but it's profound. What does permanent mean? He laughed and said it means good. There used to be a Gelugpa Geshe from Labrang, Drashikil, the monastery that Giant Sheba founded when he went back to Amdo, and is the biggest, I assume it used to be, as far as I know, biggest, huge monastery in Amdo. I don't know. You can't talk about big anymore. But he converted, so to speak, to Jonan. Also, they think that mere representations, this is that word namba, that earlier over the last 5 years we've had a lot of discussion about it. Travesty. But here you can't just say aspects of the deities. These are representations, copies of the deities, of the effect state. So when you're doing deity yoga in Gelug, these are just copies that we're meditating on. But not everyone within Gelug says this. But indeed, everyone says you have to think, I am the real deity. From deep down, you have to think that. Why? Because you're meditating on emptiness. And really, I have to say, I studied Action Tantra Deity Yoga in a lot of detail and presented that both in, well actually, there's more of it in the new edition of the second volume of the Great Exposition of Secret Mantra, but also in Tantric techniques. It's a marvelous system of meditation. And if you're first meditating on emptiness and you're peering from within emptiness, and the wisdom knowing emptiness itself is appearing as the deity, of course this is pure. And of course you are the actual. You are to think of yourself as the actual deity. But then, in Gelug, you must think, in a sense, from the depth of your heart, I am, whoever it is. Manjushri, Dara, whoever it is. And indeed, it's said in Gelug, when you meditate on emptiness in the sutra system, you are imitating the truth body of a Buddha. But you are not deliberately thinking, I am the truth body. But nevertheless, you're imitating the truth body. The nature truth body of a Buddha. Even in the sutra system. But, generally speaking in Gelug, it's said that what if you use common language in English, you'd say from the very deepy down, you don't think I am, you don't become stupidly convinced that you're Manjushri or something like that. There's some. So I sent the material. I actually should have sent it on to everyone. Maybe I should. Yes, sorry, I should have sent it on to everyone. I sent it to 10 children. The statements from John Bell Champagne and the Ganden Chiba, the Ganden throne, the person who became Ganden throne holder after teaching at the University of Virginia. That makes it sound as if you teach at the University of Virginia, you'll become Ganden throne holder. I'm waiting. And where he addressed this topic there's no addressing it with total satisfaction. Because this, I believe it's Gyatso, says you're to do it from the very depth of your being. And others say it's not quite from the very depth, but it is with complete conviction. Okay, so in any case, it is mere representations in a certain sense, but not. So this is a good presentation. What he says is true, but doesn't capture the flavor of the Gelug presentation, but it's true enough. They're not actual Buddhists, you have to say, when we do this, but you have to think I am an actual Buddha. Although a practitioner of this generation stage must meditate with an imagining that they are an actual Vajrasattva. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, he says it very nicely. Yeah, must meditate. Yeah, he says actual Vajrasattva. You must think that I'm not an actual Buddha. Yeah, he's got the contradiction in a sense. Yeah. But then Khetsun Sangpo words it another way, which is true enough again, but are just being meditated in the perspective of the mind. For your own mind, you're an actual Buddha. Don't go crazy thinking, now I'm a Buddha. As one of my friends, when we started studying at the monastery in New Jersey, said, Jeffrey, you're a bodhisattva. And, I said, give me a break. It was obvious he thought that now he was a bodhisattva. And all I thought was, you don't have any idea of what an actual bodhisattva is. Then, time. We have 10 minutes for slow reading. These are good. If you took them superficially, these are not easy to bark out in a debate. But when it's slow reading, they're nice. Then, meditative cultivations of the illusory body and appearance of clear light. Now, Nagarjuna's famous text is called, I get confused between Tsongkhapa's text and Nagarjuna's text. But in any way, there's the 5 stages, which are really best thought of as the 6 stages. So, in Tibetan class, I used to require all sorts of memorizations, which used to drive the class crazy. But then, in time, sometimes even after graduation, people would come up to me and say, those were really helpful. So, you got to learn these. So, these will put you in good stead to have memorized. Physical in 6. The first 2 become 1, which will make it 5. Physical isolation, mental isolation, verbal isolation. You see, my memory's failing me. Not really. Physical isolation, verbal isolation, that means speech. Mental isolation, clear light, illusory body, union. So these are the 6 stages of the completion stage. Are there other translations of completion stage? Of course, stage of completion. Are there other translations? Generation stage, completion stage. Stage of generation, stage of completion. So, completion stage follows generation stage. So, if you combine, not combine, but treat the first 2 as 1, then you get 5. But you have to understand, if there's 5, then there's 2 in the first. Physical isolation and verbal isolation. And it's not like they're munched together and truncated. There's still 2 there. It's clear that the list of 5 is more famous than the list of 6. So the clear light is often referred to as the 3rd stage clear light. The 4th stage, no. I said it wrong, didn't I? God, the 3rd is illusory body comes before clear light. I said it wrong, right? What did I say? I said it wrong. Certainly is a workshop. Gyulu Ursel Sunjuk. So I have to say it in Tibetan. Gyulu Ursel Sunjuk. Gyulu Ursel Sunjuk. Illusory body, clear light, and union. Union of what? Illusory body and clear light. Then, now, what's interesting in this is, so he's immediately jumping to, of course he puts illusory body first, illusory body and appearance of clear light. So he's going in the list of the 5, he's going to illusory body and clear light. And quite often, just to prepare you for what comes later, he often talks about what precedes illusory body, which is mental isolation. He often brings that topic up. So, and so forth, with what's in and so forth would only be union. Because and so forth shouldn't go backwards to the earlier of the 5 stages. It should only go forwards, I would say. Unless one wants to go to breakdowns within union, for instance. I would not. I would say and so forth only is union. But that's just my guess. Completions are not takings of the uncompounded nature of the foundational sphere of reality as the path. Well, in Gelug, the uncompounded nature of the foundational sphere of reality would be emptiness, but of course he's talking about yin tang yeshin nisu me. So it would be both emptiness and pristine wisdom and of course Nyingma's, what do you say, the Great Completeness's own identification of pristine wisdom, but this combination as the path, and it's uncompounded. And then in the next sentence, he talks in the first clause about having cultivated. He talks about, in the first clause, he's talking about the whole range of the path right up to Buddhahood. And then in the second clause, he talks about mental thorough purification. And in this latest editing over the weekend, I put at Buddhahood to make it clear that's what he's talking about. At Buddhahood, what do you have? At Buddhahood, you have an omniscient, momentary, mutable mind. Why? Because in Gelug, even the omniscient mind, in how many ever aspects it has, that mind is impermanent. And in Gelug, it's impermanent, but it goes on forever in its same form. Because you're entirely and utterly, you've overcome all obstructions. So it's not going to change in its type, but it's impermanent. So we'll stop there. And then these qualities which I've put out in Buddhahood, in bullets, in bullets are what it does, and we'll go on from there. And we better stop because I'm tired. Usually Tarba has a question at this point, but we're cutting her off.
No, I'm good today.
See you next week.